Good morning. I'm Assistant Sheriff John McGrath. I'm here to brief you and give you additional details as we know them today about the officer-involved shooting that occurred on Monday, October 4th, 2021. This is officer-involved shooting number 7 for 2021, fatal number 4. At the same time last year, we had 15 officer-involved shootings, 8 of those were fatal. This event was initiated as a possible domestic battery in progress at 6:38 p.m. on October 4th. This officer-involved shooting occurred in the 4100 block of Silver Dollar Avenue, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89102, which is the Spring Valley Area Command. As you can see to the scene to my left, the involved officers are Theron Young. He is 35 years old and has been with LVMPD since 2014. In this incident, Officer Young was armed with a Glock 17 9mm handgun equipped with a tactical light. The investigation revealed he fired 16 rounds during this incident. Officer Young is assigned to the Investigative Services Division, Gang Vice Bureau. The second officer is Joel Blasco. He is 31 years old and has been with LVMPD since 2014. In this incident, Officer Blasco was armed with a Glock 34 9mm handgun equipped with a tactical light. The investigation revealed he fired 3 rounds during this incident. Officer Blasco was also assigned to the Investigative Services Division, Gang Vice Bureau. The suspect in this case has been identified as Demetrius Roberts. He is 21 years old, black male adult. He is 6'1" and weighs 218 pounds. As you can see, his picture is on the screen. In this incident, Roberts was armed with a semi-auto Taurus G2C 9mm handgun. The investigation revealed he fired 9 rounds during this incident. Roberts' charges, if he had survived, include attempted murder on a police officer, 2 counts, shooting into an occupied vehicle, and child endangerment. During the investigation of this officer-involved shooting, it was determined that Roberts took cover in front of a vehicle which was occupied by his mother and his 2-year-old son. As Roberts ambushed our officers, he shot through the vehicle, placing his 2-year-old son in danger. You can also see the impact of his gunshots in the photo you see to my left. The details of the officer-involved shooting are: on Monday, October 4th, 2021, officers were from LVMPD's gang unit were conducting surveillance on a vehicle that was parked in the alley behind the 4100 block of Silver Dollar. This vehicle had previously fled from officers during an earlier traffic stop. The officers conducted the surveillance were in an unmarked vehicle and were dressed in plain clothes. At approximately 6:38 p.m., a woman and a man, Demetrius Roberts, the suspect, were seen walking towards the vehicle that the officers were surveilling. Roberts and the woman appeared to be having an argument, and Roberts is seen by the officers grabbing the woman by the arms. The plainclothes officers announced this information over the radio and requested a marked patrol unit to respond. Officer Theron Young and Officer Joel Blasco were riding together in a marked patrol vehicle and arrived in the alley seconds after the request was made by the plainclothes officers. As Officers Young and Blasco were exiting their patrol vehicle, Roberts took a position of cover behind a vehicle and opened fire towards the officers. Officer Young returned fire as he ran to find cover. His handgun had a malfunction, but he was able to clear it. After shooting at the officers, Roberts ran away towards Penwood Avenue. Both officers chased Roberts as he ran between 2 apartment buildings. Officer Blasco was running directly behind Roberts, and Officer Young took a different route to cut off Roberts' path. Once on Penwood Avenue, Roberts took cover behind another vehicle and fired his gun at one of the officers. Both Officer Young and Blasco fired their guns towards Roberts. Once again, Officer Young had a malfunction of his weapon. Officer Young cleared the malfunction and fired his gun for a third time towards Roberts as he was running away with the firearm in his hand. Roberts was struck by the gunfire and fell to the ground, and officers immediately responded and provided first aid. Medical personnel pronounced Roberts deceased at the scene. The woman involved in this incident was also struck by gunfire. She was transported to UMC Trauma, where she was treated for her injuries and later released. An officer was treated and released by medical personnel at the scene after being struck by shrapnel. I will now show you the body-worn camera video of the officer-involved shooting. After it's done playing, I will take the time to slow down the video and explain what's occurring.
Control G61, shots fired at officers in the alley behind 4156. 4156, the alley behind Silver Dollar. We do not have visual on the suspect. Shit! Get down, man! Control G61, subject is down.
So as you can see, that happened really quickly, and it's hard to see everything that happened, so I'll try to slow it down a little bit for you. As officers are arriving, there's no audio because it takes 30 seconds for our audio to kick in on body-worn cameras. So immediately they start taking fire, the officer has the malfunction, he clears it. Meanwhile, the suspect's running around the other side of this building. Officer Blasco is in foot pursuit. Officer Young right here on his radio then goes around the other side of this building to try to cut the suspect off. So there's the suspect at the front of this van. You could see him, both the officer and the suspect were using that van as cover, unbeknownst to the officer. So he fires one round, has another malfunction, clears that from behind the vehicle, and then the suspect's on the other side of the van crossing the street.
Get down, man! Control G61, subject is down.
This concludes the briefing. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Might be a dumb question, but the white vehicle that you showed that had the impacts to it?
Yes.
Is that a police vehicle, or whose vehicle is that?
That's the suspect's mother's vehicle, I believe, but that's the vehicle she was driving. And the angle is the suspect's in the front of that car, and the officers are getting out of their patrol vehicle behind.
Okay, and then I believe you said it showed the impacts of the bullets coming through the vehicle. Are those bullets that officers fired, or was he firing from within the vehicle, or do you understand the particulars there?
Yeah, so the suspect was firing from the front of the vehicle towards the officers through the vehicle. The mother turned out not to be a very good witness because she was covering the 2-year-old child to make sure that she wouldn't be hit by the bullets.
So just so I understand that the suspect was outside the vehicle and firing through the vehicle at officers?
That's correct.
And did you find the shell casings and all that from his weapon there?
Yes. All the suspect's shell casings are at the front of the vehicle, 8 of them, and then 1 is on Penwood Avenue.
And are you aware of any significant criminal history or violent activity on behalf of this individual previously?
So we don't discuss the criminal history of the suspect. So I'm not going to get into that right now. But he is from Nevada, and that's all I'll say.
And what was his two-year-old child doing there? And why was the mom's car involved? If you don't mind explaining a little bit more about why they were in the area, why there was a child leading up to this altercation.
Sure. The female involved was the girlfriend of the suspect, and she lived there. And mom was bringing the child over to that address. And everything occurred in the alley.
And we know that domestic violence has just been on a rise this past few years. For example, domestic violence homicide also climbing within Metro. Explain a little bit and touch on how these situations can become very volatile very quickly.
Well, as you can see, the plainclothes officers saw a potential domestic violence incident and they called for assistance. And before they could even get out of their cars, they were taking rounds. So everyone's tensions are high in those situations. You never know what's going to happen. And it's just an example of when officers go on a call, it's unexpected what will happen then. And this is a good example of that.
And are you personally concerned about this rise in domestic violence throughout these past few months?
Of course, we're all concerned. We're doing everything we can to lower the incidence of domestic violence, especially repeated calls at the same address, and trying to get assistance to those victims.